with Tent Pegs and Crowns, and I am back today with a process video for the week 2 of the Take 4 issue 5 Fishers of Men, a devotional by Open Journey, and we will be meditating on Luke 5 verses 10 through 11. Do not be afraid, Jesus said to Simon. From now on you will catch men. And when they had brought their boats ashore, they left everything and followed him. So this was a really fun journal entry because I actually got to play around with some of my mediums, some of my distress paints, and some stamps and stencils and stuff. So I kind of incorporated a little bit of everything that I love to do. So if you want to find out how I did this, stick around. Let's get into it. Okay, so for the sake of the video, I'm going to go ahead and fast forward the process, and I want to apologize for the video quality in advance. I did not realize that my lens was dirty when I first started to record. I just thought it was the lighting, so many apologies. As you can see, I have already pre-cut some of the elements that I thought I wanted to use for this layout. One was the image of the disciples on the boat. I don't think that they were disciples at this time, but that was the image I went with. The little cluster of fishers of men, some of the flower stickers from the clear sticker page, and I included a little piece of like that graph paper, some more elements and some more flowers. I wanted to use the big alpha stamps. I am so in love with the alpha stamp, so I took it out, intended to use it. Excuse me. And I also wanted to use the stencils, wasn't sure which ones. I wanted to use the new Fishers of Men stamp set, and I also wanted to incorporate some of these flowers. She has a past stamp kit called Faith Floral. I'll try to link it down below if it's still available. And my idea was to recreate that same flower that you just saw me pick up using that stamp set. So I would stamp it on clear sticker or just onto the page itself. But I don't end up actually doing so, but you'll see why later on. So here I am just trying to arrange the elements and what I think I want the layout to look like, and you'll just kind of see me play around with how I want the layout to look like. This takes me a little bit. Usually this is how I usually start. I don't have a real clear idea of what I really want. I just know that normally when I first start, I put elements on either, corners. I don't usually do a focal point in the center of a page. I'm not really sure why I don't do that, or I do that. But I usually go to either corners on the left or the right side. So these are some of the mediums that I'm going to go ahead and use. Is the Distress Paint from Tim Holtz. Here you kind of can see me trying to color match some of the flowers and colors to the paints that I have. So color swatching is an amazing idea. Thank you, Tiffany, for suggesting that I do this. It has made coordinating colors and being able to see what colors I have on hand so much easier. So there was two colors that I tried to use at first, which was Mermaid Lagoon and Tumbled Glass. When I took out the swatch sheet, I realized that Speckled Egg matched a lot better. But still, that wasn't the color that I wanted to use as the focal points. I still wanted to go with Tumbled Glass. I just felt like it was a really pretty light blue. Here you see me try matching some of the pink for the stencil, because I'm going to go ahead and use the cross stencil. So I decided that I wanted to match some of the flowers and incorporate some of those pink elements or pink colors onto this page. So my idea was to use the spun sugar and the picked raspberry colors, or the distress oxides, and because I wanted it to be like on the background, so the very first layer, because I wanted to cover some of it with the paint. Before I lay down any ink of any kind, or stencil markings or stamps, I usually make sure that the elements are placed where I think I'm going to want them. This will change sometimes from time to time. I will end up moving things. However, I think I really like this layout, and so you'll see me kind of place the stencil over the elements to see kind of where I would want them. But the reason I do this is because I don't want to actually place ink where I'm going to place either clear stickers or stamps. I want it in very specific places. So I do it over the elements very carefully as to not get ink over that, because I do want it off to the side as close as possible, just to make a more natural flow. I will be alternating between the picked raspberry and the spun sugar, just to give it a more gradient, natural look to the crosses. And when I use the stencil, so I'm placing some to the top on the left hand corner and some underneath the boat on the bottom, kind of mid-center but off to the right, because I do have the cluster element to the bottom right hand corner of the page. But I am placing it strategically to kind of draw the eye back and forth between both pages and trying to make a flow more naturally. When adding elements to the background, such as texture, I have found that it brings a more balanced feel when you work in sets of negatives. For example, like I'm going to place about 3 clusters of the crosses onto the page. I just feel like it balances the page more. I don't know if that's true or not. It just feels that way to me. So you'll see me place some the top left, mid-center, and because it wasn't on the bottom right and it's more centered, you see me place some on the top right hand corner. But those top right hand corners, some of them will be covered up with the paint, as you'll see later on in the video. And here you'll see me kind of just take a moment and pause, and this is the most important part of all: plotting. So I was debating on whether or not to add more stenciling or inking, and then I remembered I wanted to add the flowers. So this is what I was talking about earlier in the video, about using or recreating that flower that's on the top left hand corner and doing my own. So what I wanted to do was try to use colored inks to stamp the flowers so I can incorporate the flowers into the layout. So I grab just kind of a random scrap piece of clear sticker paper that I have, and I grab the flower that kind of looks more the most similar to the flowers on the cluster, and I'm gonna try out stamping it in distress ink. So not the distress oxide, but the distress ink. I think I go with Uncharted Mariner first, and it was just too dark. That is the only blue ink that I have, so I decided against it because, like I said, it was way too dark. I'm opting for ink just because I am stamping on clear sticker paper. Oxide usually tends to be a little bit more runny and it kind of smears when doing this technique, so I found that ink works best. And I know that on the camera it doesn't actually show the intensity of the blue Uncharted Mariner, but it was super dark. It almost was like it would stand out like a sore thumb. So I was like, well, let me try maybe black, maybe because there's black elements on there, it'll work better. And again, it was just too intense. The blacks on these elements are a little bit softer. So I do have scorched timber, and I was very positive that this ink would work because it's not like a true black, but it's also not a true brown. It's kind of like a good middle ground. And when I go to stamp it, it is softer and I do like it. However, I forgot about it. Later on in my video, as I'm adding the elements, I completely forgot about it because I set it to the side so it can dry. And you know what they say, out of sight, out of mind. So completely forgot. I know that they say that when you use acrylics or watercolors, it's always best to start with the softest color, but I go against the grain and decided that I wanted to use the darkest color that I wanted to apply to the page, which was Mermaid Lagoon from the Distress Paint. You see me add just a little bit of a drop onto an acrylic stamp block, and then I add a little bit of water to make it more fluid. There's nothing that the water does for this technique when I'm trying to apply it. It just makes it more fluid and easier for me to add with the spatula. And you'll see me just use the edge of the spatula to make little markings here and there. I don't try to apply too many here at the beginning, just because I'm not really sure where all the distress paint is going to be applied to and how the finished product is going to look. But I do know that for the most part, those are going to be pretty empty spaces. So that's where I apply like more texture to the background. I am also going to start using the tumbled glass color. For this one, I'm going to use a slimmer and longer spatula because I want to just add more definition and depth to the color, kind of like highlights here and there, just to give it some contrast. So I really liked how the top left or top right corner looked. So I'm going to apply more dark blue to the bottom and also do the same technique down to the left bottom of the page with the lighter tumbled glass color distress paint. Again, adding some water just to make it more fluid. I've had these paints for a while, so they're not as fluid as they used to be. So I need to add a little bit of water to, to make them move onto the page how I want them. And again, it's not for a special effect. The water is just strictly to make it more pliable for when I apply it to the journaling page. Here, I went ahead and edited some of the video because it's just me fussing around with some of the elements. I wasn't entirely happy with how the blue ended up falling onto my page, so I tried to move some of the elements and switch them out. Just decided to leave it as it was and decided to go ahead and use the new stamp set that coordinates with this issue, the Devotional Fishers of Men. It's the new Fishers of Men stamp kit, and I used the element that has Matthew 4:19, follow him, on the top right hand corner. Here you'll see me reach for the script element of the Fishers of Men stamp set. Again, I wanted to add more depth and interest to the page since I really wasn't happy with the blue. I was thinking that maybe adding more would kind of draw the eye away from how I thought it just didn't flow nicely. Earlier I mentioned that the speckled egg colored from the distress line matched better, but I wanted to use the mermaid lagoon and the tumbled glass just because I wanted a difference in depth of color. So what I'm going to do, I'm quickly trying to make sure that the paint is actually dry before I stamp. I'm going to use the Distress Oxide ink to stamp the script onto it because Oxide will stamp on top of the Distress paint and it will show. Editing out some of the non-fun screen time, so edited out the time that I took to try to make sure that the distress paint was dry. You see me try to go over with the dry, I think it's a baby wipe, just to make sure that it's dry, so none of the distress paint ends up on my stamp set. Using the speckled egg color, I go in and just kind of stamped in random pages, random spots, the script, making sure that most of it lies on top of the blue though, because again, I want to kind of break up that blue. I thought it was overpowering and overwhelming, so I wanted to just, downplay that and make sure that your eye was drawn to other items as well on the page. And to clarify, there is no right or wrong way to journal, especially with mixed media. I feel like mixed media is actually very forgiving. That is one of the reasons why I love doing mixed media projects or layouts or journaling. It's because with mixed media, you can blend, cover up, or add more interest to the page. It doesn't always work out, but like Lindsay Decor says, you can just cover it up with white gesso and try again. So mixed media is actually very, very forgiving. And so I don't want to overdo it. You saw me take out the stencil and then decided, well, let me take a step back. Sometimes taking a step back is the best choice. So you'll see me play with the elements, and I decide that, you know what, I do like the elements where they're at. I can probably try to do something to cover up the blue. So I went ahead and just started to glue down my elements onto the page. Once again, I want to reiterate that this is how I prefer to work through journaling projects, and I usually end up gluing down or applying onto my page the elements from background, working from the background up towards, in front of you. So you'll see me apply the very back or the bottom layers of a cluster first to the page. I don't usually create a cluster and then add it to the page. I just feel like sometimes that's too much work. I feel like maybe adding them one by one is a lot more work. Who knows? But for me, I feel like I can be more precise when I am adding them individually as opposed as creating and gluing down a cluster and then applying that cluster to the page. I went ahead and edited out how embarrassingly long it took me to remove the backing from that sticker element that I cut out. So that's what happened there. For the flower element, I went ahead and removed just a little bit, or exposed a little bit of the clear sticker from removing the backing, and I cut off just a little bit, and using that exposed piece of the clear sticker as a hinge. If you don't know what I'm talking about, Lindsay Decor is a hack of sorts that she came up with to apply larger stickers onto your page, so it doesn't create those crinkles, or it doesn't, if you remove the backing off the sticker, it usually tends to kind of fold or start, to fall onto the page, and sometimes is just not cool how it just gets stuck on there. So removing a little bit and creating a little hinge and then removing the backing as you apply the sticker gives it a more smoother application onto your page. And moving on to the bottom right hand corner of the page, I do the same technique, create a little hinge, and then I decided and remembered that when you put a large sticker across the seam of a book or pages, what happens when you crease it is that some of that ink will kind of start to peel off. And so I didn't want that to happen, and I cut alongside where the seam kind of I would think the seam would fall into the seam. And so I cut the sticker to make sure that when I applied it, it could kind of fold into the seam, and then I would tuck in the rest of the sticker a little bit underneath the seam so it kind of flowed more naturally. Kind of like what you see me do here. I'm kind of like adjusting it and making sure it lines up. Re-emphasizing there is no right or wrong way. You can totally just leave it as is and just apply the sticker as a whole, but I am very particular about stickers and how they flow onto a page, so I didn't want that worn out kind of peeled look or effect onto the boat of this, or on the boat for this image. I wasn't entirely happy with how empty the bottom or underneath the boat it seemed, even with the cluster, so I decided to use one of the elements from the clear sticker page. It was one of the more tattered, more worn out. It was kind of fraying at the ends net, and I used that to put it underneath the cluster. Now that did cover up the graph paper that I put underneath, but because it's clear sticker paper, you can still see the graph a little bit underneath the net, so I'm still kind of happy with how it turned out. A bit of the net sticker ended up on the image of the boat, so you just see me kind of smooth it out as best as I could because you can see it up close. When I was going to go ahead and glue down the cluster with the little Fishers of Men element on there, I decided that I wanted to add a little bit of brown thread to come out from the opposite side of the cluster, just to give it an effect of it like the threads coming undone on the other side. You'll see me fuss with it a little bit, just kind of like rolling it up, undoing it, pulling it, just trying to give it some kinks and stuff, just to give it some, worn effect, because it's pretty brand new thread, so it kind of just, sticks out pretty straight. So it finally laid somewhat decent. And so I went ahead and applied a glue dot to make sure that it didn't move while I was trying to put glue to the cluster, so that way I can kind of stick it down. Most of the cluster is what's going to hold it down. The little drop of glue was just so that it wouldn't move from where I wanted it to be. It ended up kind of bunching up, so I used the tip of the scissors to kind of pull and push where I wanted it to kind of lay. Doing the same thing I kind of did with the fishing boat. I tore or cut the Fishers of Men element sticker. So I cut right after Fishers and left of Men together. And that's what I'm going to kind of tuck underneath the seam. So it kind of flows more natural and more organically. And using the hinge hack. I peel a little bit of the sticker back, and then I try my best, or as best as I can, to line it up so it kind of just flows together evenly, kind of if it was one whole piece. I didn't like how it stuck out by itself and it just kind of got lost in the white space. So I went ahead and pulled out one of the micron pens. It's actually not a micron pen, it's a fine line tip pen from Mr. Pen. And I just kind of extended the shadowy part from under the boat onto the title of the fish, or to the text, The Fishers of Men, just to make sure that the text didn't get lost into the blank page. Now that the elements are placed and glued onto the page and most of my background texture has been stamped and added, I am going to go ahead and try to distract the eye from the starkness of the blue and how bright it is. So I'm going to go ahead and use the cross stencil, and I'm going to apply the picked raspberry and the spun sugar on top of the blue, in hopes of kind of drawing the eye away from, just how bright it is. Again, I just was not happy how it looked, so here I am, and I'm gonna do this in a cluster of 5s, again in a negative sets. At this point, I'm kind of panicking because I still don't like the blue. I decided to reactivate the distress paint just a little bit from the leftover of the paint when I was applying the dark blue at the beginning. And I used a tiny brush because I am going to go ahead and try to use splatters and see if that helps give it a more blended effect. So again, I'm not wanting to use more blue. I'm just kind of wanting it to blend it into the page. So I'm kind of hoping that the blue splatters does the trick for me. As I'm finishing up the splatters, it's still not a blended look. And although I don't want to add more blue, I do a little drop of blue onto the acrylic block again, because I did notice the markings on the top of the blank space or the middle of the layout, and I wanted to add more, figuring that this kind of would, or hoping that it would give it a more natural flow. So I do just little chicken scratches here and there, kind of markings, just to kind of give it like a more faded effect into the white space, so it's not just like stark white and like really bright blue. Doing the final scratches or lines on the journaling page, I'm actually really happy with how it's turning out. I'm still not happy with how bright it is though. I noticed that I had some leftover black ink. I'm not really sure what medium it is. It could be the distress crayons. So I just reactivated it from, I guess, my last project, and added a little bit of water, and then decided to add the black splatters onto the blue as much as possible without making it look like it was overdone. While adding the splatters onto the page, I realized that the top right hand corner was, that the blues were kind of blending into the white. So I used the same Mr. Pen fine line tip marker to kind of outline a little bit of the graph and a little bit of the little white on the follow him sticker. Just to make sure that it didn't get lost with all that white, because of the blue, I just felt like those light blues in that sticker, they kind of faded into the background. Okay, so I'm still not very happy with the blue. You see me grab some of the white flowers from the die cuts to try to see if I can break up the blue. And then I tried to add one of the little notebook pages from the digital file. I immediately did not like that, so I removed that. But I knew that I wanted to use the white flowers to break up all that blue. I felt like white would kind of, tone it down. Remembering that I had more add-ons, I went ahead and took out the fishing license element that Ingrid so geniusly included with this kit. It's the Psalms 18:16, and I know that I want to use this because it has a like natural brown to it, and there's some browns in the nets and stuff like that that I did not incorporate earlier. So I feel like the brown is really going to help break up that blue. However, sometimes knowing that you want to use an element or that it's the right element, the idea doesn't just naturally the element doesn't just naturally flow in there. So for the next few minutes, embarrassingly enough, you'll see me kind of play around with the placement of the fishing license. I was thinking, like, do I want it on the top corner and cover up the stamp? Do I want to cover the bottom corner? It was just too big. And so I did think about reprinting it from the digital files and just making it smaller, but my printer doesn't exactly print true to color, and so I wanted this particular brown. It just matched better, and so I decided that I was gonna tear off the fishing license, the edges of it, and then kind of use the scissors to wear out the edges, kind of like if it was already a very used and or well used fishing license. I tear up the edges, and then I try to place the white flowers to see if it was small enough to try to fit into the page. It still felt a little bit big, so I remove part of the bottom that I'm going to keep for later on. It says he drew me out of deep waters, so I don't want to throw that away. And because I wanted to blend in with the, distressed and torn and edges, I wanted to add a little bit of the blue, kind of like the splatters onto the fishing license, and then adding the spray to it, and just let the water run and flow so it can have time to seep into the actual paper. So it kind of looks worn and tethered and old. Because you add water to paper, or when you add water to paper, what it tends to do, it kind of tends to warp. So I use the heating gun, not just to dry the paper and see if that's how much I liked, or if it was how much blue I liked, but also to try, a hack is that when you use the heat gun, you can actually end up uncurving that warpness to the paper. I also decided that I wanted it to look more worn out, and that I didn't like the white fraying on the edges. So I used the Distress Oxide, and I believe I used Vintage Photo. And then I used kind of like that makeup brush to kind of distress the edges, or distress color the edges, and a little bit on the inside. I think that the video is a little too fast, so you don't see that, but I do distress inside the fishing license. You'll see me now that I like how the element looks. Now I'm playing with the placement of this. Where exactly do I want to lay it? And I do like it on the bottom left hand corner of the page. The issue was, where exactly did I want the blue flowers? Because now that I have the big brown element, I don't need to break up a lot of that blue. So I figured if I place it on the bottom right hand corner of the bottom right hand corner of the fishing license, it kind of gave it a nice flow from the stark brown into a softer brown of the net of the fishing boat. Earlier in the video, I know I mentioned how I don't usually create a cluster that I'm going to lay out onto the page. I know that's what it looks like. However, this will kind of be a more moving or more interactive element. So I am gluing the flowers onto the fishing license, because the fishing license will be used kind of like a hinge. So I'm going to add tape to the top to where half of it is an overhang. The overhang, I'm going to go ahead and fold back and then place that back sticky part onto the page, so it kind of creates a hinge, allowing me to open it upward like if it was a flap, giving me some privacy or some room to write a private prayer underneath. I do write off my prayer and the scripture off camera, but all in all, this is the finished product. I hope that you enjoyed the process. I hope that this inspires you to journal, and thank you for joining me. Until next time, love you. Bye.